Today I want to talk to you about technology. Technology is anything that enhances the way humans interact with other people, what they do for their job, medical research, medical procedures, anything that enhances everyday life. One thing I want to show is that if it wasn't for technology, I wouldn't be able to give you this presentation I'm about to. With electricity, it was one of the biggest technology advances of the time. In 1900, the light bulb was the first invention that harnessed electricity. Fast forward 30 years, we start working on the computers. Computers are something that can calculate. At least the first computer was something that could perform mathematical procedures without human interaction. Later the term was changed to do calculations, not just mathematical. In 1822, Charles Babbage came up with a way on paper to create a machine that would allow a computer, as the term dictates, to perform calculations without the human input. However, Charles Babbage was not able to finish his design and did not get enough funding. His son, however, Henry Babbage, was able to, in 1910, develop a portion of the machine. This machine was able to perform basic calculations. Now, calculations such as 1 plus 2, stuff like that. It was basically an on and off. It was able to calculate, which is much like the machines before this time, as the Romans had a tablet that had beads on it that they could slide to perform mathematical procedures. Fast forward to 1937. The ABC machine was developed by John Vincent Ananoff and Cliff Berry, ABC. They were doing research at Iowa College, which is now known as Iowa State University. This was the first computer that contained vacuum tubes, which is in itself an invention of technology, because vacuum tubes allowed the computer to basically have a digital type of commuting power. This was able to do binary mathematics and Boolean logic. However, it had no CPU. Technically, this is the first computer that was created because it was a full functional and completed design. However, in 1953, IBM released the IBM 703, also known as the Electronic Data Processing Machine. IBM's computer was the first large-scale computer that was manufactured. Lots of them were produced, and the computer stored internal addresses and had memory. It's also a punching machine, which kept track of hours and stuff like this. This was very big at the time and a very big leap in technology because it was able to do more than just mathematical equations. So the fact that IBM was able to take this technology and harness it allowed for the stepping stone of technology we see nowadays. Later, in 1956, students at MIT developed the first transistor. The transistor was basically a bunch of vacuum tubes packed together into a smaller device, so it created more power for a computer. This was a great step in the evolution of computers because now it allowed smaller versions that were more powerful. Fast forwarding about 20 years, working with transistors and making them stronger, in 1974, Xerox, which is a printer company, actually developed a computer that had the first graphical user interface. The graphical user interface is what you see on your computer when you start up with the windows and the logos. There's graphics in the interface. So with this computer, it had a mouse, and a keyboard, it had networking and data storage, and a printing mechanism that is what you get was what you see. So anything that was on your screen, you'd be able to print out, and that's what you would get. However, the Alto, which is the Xerox machine computer, wasn't sold because Xerox didn't know what it had. So later, it was taken from Bill Gates, Microsoft, who developed Windows off of this machine that they had saw when they were touring the Xerox. And most of you have seen the video. If you've taken Intro to Computers in college, they show this video for every class. So it's definitely something to want to watch if you haven't. I believe it's Silicon Valley. It's really good. Moving forward, Intel developed the first microprocessor, which took a bunch of transistors and made them even smaller and put them together into something that was about the size of your fingernail, which was the first microprocessor, which is known as the 404. This was the first chip that had random access memory and was able to have an input and output device capable. The input-output, this chip was able to hold 2,300 transistors in a little thing that's about the size of your fingernail. Pretty remarkable for the technology at the time. This is the first step in the expansion of PCs, personal computers, stuff that was able to sit on a desktop or be made into a laptop. Of course, these weren't developed yet, not until the 80s when Apple came out with their Mac 1, was the first real home PC that was very profitable. I want to fast forward to current day life. As you've seen over the years, computers are getting smaller and faster, thinner and lighter, and they're becoming more powerful, and they're able to multitask, and none of this would have been possible without the previous inventions. If you've ever heard of a supercomputer, there's supercomputers that are made that are even more powerful than the machine that you have at your house, and on a very astronomical scale. For example, one of my supporting theories is going over the statistics of the growth in computers. The first computer was the ENIAC, which was developed in 1950s, did 1,905 operations per second. Now, the machine that was developed in 1971, which was the Intel 4004, which was the first one that had the transistor, did 90,000 operations per second. Cray developed a system in 1982, which was the XMP, which now is known as a supercomputer, which was doing 420 million floating operations per second. Just think about that real quick. 420 million instructions per second. That's ridiculous. Now, if you fast forward to current times, in 2001, Intel released Knight's Corner, which is a supercomputer, which was the first computer that was capable of a teraflop. Teraflop is basically operations per second. A trillion operations per second. However, it wasn't just instructions or operations, it was calculations. So, a trillion calculations per second. That's 60 trillion calculations in 1 minute. How many minutes are there in a day? Think about it. That's a ridiculous amount of calculations. And they have a computer now which is even faster because, as you know, with technology, things get smaller and faster. So that's just a benchmark of what's capable. I just want to state that, that's really remarkable. So without the evolution of technology, the human race would be very far behind on where it has evolved. And with the development of the computer, I feel that computers have changed everyday life. They have increased research, which has allowed us to put a man on the moon or send a vehicle to Mars to do research. I mean, that's very astronomical when it comes to thinking of what we are capable to do as humans. And I just want to point out that without technology and without people putting time and investing time into making it better, we would still be back in the Middle Ages with torches. So thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I changed your minds